First order of business is to go over last week's order of business. So here we are. We're going to start in with our Q&As from this week. There weren't too many of them. So remember, you get points for these. Do make sure that they are related to the content of the week and not just I couldn't do my homework, or I can't understand the homework, or other ancillary sort of things that are better left being sent to me in email. You don't get points for those, so please, I'll give you one mulligan on this, and then I go goose egg. So, all right. Is there a way to remove loud sounds made in the background of a sound example without losing too much quality? I know I'm going to make fun of spelling errors, but that's my bad. Good thing these are anonymous. All right, so here's my guidance on this. If the unwanted, so all right, there's a couple of things here that the question's a little vague in terms of how it's delivered, but it's a valid question in that it's asking about technique. So the first three things I would try to find out if the unwanted sound can be isolated. Whether that is generally, if it's surrounded by silence, then that's an easy one. You just notch it out. Replace it with room tone, you're done. If the unwanted sound is quieter than the desired sound, then you might want to look at attempting to use the sound model, the sound removal, or you could try the noise reduction. Though for most loud sounds that are I think the example that was in the question that I cut out of this was like a book dropping in the background or something like that. I would think that any kind of short sound like that is best left to if you're going to use these newfangledy tools, you should look at doing it with the sound remover. If you're not willing to experiment with just trying to notch it out, cut the audio, slice and dice. Of course, in a production environment, you'd roll one more damn take of your stuff so that you have good, clean sound, as opposed to using the sound as is. Now, this was, like I said, I'll take contrived questions. That's fine. Second, okay, so that's the second one. If the third is if the unwanted sound happens in a narrow frequency range, that is something more that you might want to look at using EQ. So you find the frequency range where that specific thing's happening. And if it's not too broad, if it's very narrow, you could just do a notch on that frequency range, and that'll take care of most of the sound as well. What we find, though, is that if it's something that happens in a room, you have reflections off of walls and off of ceilings and floors and objects. And so you're going to have these kind of echoes and halftones and kind of room sound that makes removing a particular noise more difficult. And you got that when we were playing around with that last week with like trying to remove a car horn, is that there's all these harmonics you got to deal with. It's very similar when you're dealing with noises or sounds that are unwanted. Okay. Is there such a thing as Adobe Audition project files? Also, is there a difference between import, export, and open save? That second question I'm not quite as sure about. So for multi-track projects in Audition, which we're going to talk about this evening, there is a session file, which is a .sesx. Not SEX. For individual files, though, there's really only the output file itself. So generally speaking, there's not at least not that I've bothered to see. I haven't seen that there's a way to save kind of like if you're just working on a single audio file. Generally speaking, it's you bring in what you bring in and you save what you save. And if you're smart, you're not saving over your original file. Once an audio clip from Premiere has been extracted into Audition, then edited, saved, and is switched back to Premiere, where does the extracted file within Audition go? Can you edit it again? Well, the short answer is you can edit it again, but usually it will be in the same folder that the original audio is in. But understand that Audition remembers the last folder that you saved it in. So when you save the file in Audition, you should be paying attention to what folder that Audition is saving it to. I've done this many, many times. Have I done this where I've been working on one project, I switch to a different one, and I go to save a work in progress piece or an intermediate audio file, and it gets saved to the other project folder. Man, if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have at least 10 bucks. That's a lot of nickels. All right. So just remember, Audition remembers the last folder that you saved to. This is kind of the same thing with most Adobe products. So yeah, it doesn't automatically save it to a known location. I think the default, if you've never done it, would be in the same folder that you opened the file. But again, be careful with that. For audio, is it always better for the format to be .wav? And if so, would it better to be convert any audio? Would it be better to convert any audio you use for a project into WAV for it to be easier to edit in Audition and or Premiere? That was a mouthful. So yeah, the file format does matter, and there's some that are equivalent. So there's two that, generally speaking, you'll find for most audio work in film or production audio is going to be, they're going to be WAV files or AIF files. Okay, these two are functionally equivalent. They're not actually equivalent, but they both contain uncompressed audio. Now, I put uncompressed and lossless with a star because you can save it with bad settings uncompressed. You can save WAV files as 8-bit WAV files, which would be horrific. Or you could save a WAV file as 8 kilohertz WAV file, which would also be horrific. So you have to be cognizant of, when you're saving audio and uncompressed, what are the two numbers that I'm looking for? 48 kilohertz and 24 is that's excessive, but 16 at least, 16 bits and 48 kilohertz. Okay, so, and that doesn't matter whether it's stereo or mono or 18 track or whatever. I mean, those are the two minimum quality standards. It's 48 kilohertz, 16-bit. So be aware that when you look at file formats like MP3, AAC, or M4A, or MP4, generally speaking, these are all lossy compressions and really shouldn't be used for detailed audio work. Okay. That said, you're delivering a project for YouTube, it's going to get crunchy anyway. So don't, but you should always work in the highest quality files you can afford to. So yeah, WAV files are good. Understand that when you pull audio from if you're pulling, well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about this. There's actually a question to this extent. So I'm going to move on. So the tutorial favored choosing export to Adobe Premiere Pro when getting an edited sequence back to Premiere Pro. When is going the mixdown session to new file entire session route preferable? Well, when the Premiere Pro project is not on the same system, because this is basically it'll try and open a Premiere Pro project. When you do the export to Premiere Pro, it's basically saying, where's the Premiere Pro project? And it cracks open the Premiere Pro project file, looks inside, man, that's a mouthful, Premiere Pro project file. And then cracks it up and says, which sequence do you want us to dump this in? And so you have to have that project file on the same workstation as Audition. If you don't, then you can't do that. So that's the easiest situation. The other one would be when you're basically exporting mixdowns for some other editor. Maybe you're working with somebody that only works in Final Cut or in Avid, whatever. It's like you will run across them out there. So you should know how to not just rely on Adobe's interconnections. And I go into some detail on this tonight. What other industry standard audio editing programs are there besides Adobe Audition? This was almost like a gimme question. So my answer to this is the 800-pound gorilla of post-production audio is called Pro Tools. 10 out of 10 professionals. It's not even like 9 out of 10 dentists. It's like all of them use Pro Tools. You don't find anybody who's out there hanging a shingle for audio post-production using Audition. Sorry, they just don't. You will find people who are serious about doing post-production audio are using Pro Tools all the time, every time. So get used to it. Just don't get tweaked about it. Just kind of accept it. I do say that, for music, there's lots of options. There's Logic, Cubase, Ableton. There's tons, and they're all good, but they don't do film sound. There's really now. I mean, you could plausibly do film sound on Audacity. Plausibly, though, I don't suggest it, but you could. I don't think Audacity has a 5.1 mixer, but if you're doing, like I said, YouTube videos and you don't have Adobe, you can do all of your video editing open source if you want these days, and it's almost doable. So I don't go into it. That's all. Yeah. When recording audio and video at the same time, is it better to use 2 separate devices or have them connected? I'm assuming that you guys are talking about dual system. So my answer is, for the most flexibility, you should use dual system. It's also redundant, which is not bad. You guys know what dual system is, right? What's dual system? Anyone but Evan. Go ahead.
Recording on 2 different devices, so you can either sync up or use whatever has this audio.
Right, but it's one's for picture and the other's for sound, right? Yeah. So that's why they call it dual system. If you're recording production audio onto camera, it's called single system, or just shooting on camera. It's like you're just recording. So for the most flexibility, though, because when you start to move into more interesting productions, you might have a production mixer roll on with a cart, and he opens up his kit, and he's got wireless mics for every principal actor who's on screen. And that could be 8, it could be 16. I've seen him do it. It's crazy. But, so there'll be a wireless mic for everybody, and then there'll probably be 1 or more booms that are running the set as well, and they might all be wireless, but now you're like, oh crap, I can't record that many channels on a camera. That's why dual system is preferred that way. So dual system, scratch mic on a production camera, or like I said, if you start to go in that direction with production, you're dealing with the production sound guy is going to give you a sound box that you're going to plug into your camera, and it's going to basically give you a scratch mix of all that he's doing on camera as well, so that it's easier to sync up. For easier post, obviously recording on directly into camera would be easier, and there are even tools in Premiere and third-party tools like Pluralize and stuff like that will sync audio for you. So it's like dual system's not tough. It's just a little more work. It's usually going to sound a lot better, because the sound circuitry inside of cameras is not known to be like super quality. It's adequate for interviews, if you're doing interviews and nonfiction stuff. But if you're doing like narrative work, I wouldn't record it on camera. Not if I could help it. Okay. Oftentimes, the level of volume that I work with at one computer might be different than the level it will be heard later. Is it worthwhile to work at 100% volume on a project? I'm assuming this is talking about how you mix your output. We'll talk a little bit about mastering, but not much. The short answer is mixing for film is not the same as mixing for YouTube. So if you're mixing for theatrical or even like film festival sort of release, you probably should be aware of not overdriving. You don't want to basically run it up against the peak of your audio dynamic range. So you'll be running at a -6 total, or something along those lines. You guys know when I say -6? Nobody? All right. So, okay. Well, what I'm talking about is the decibel full scale, right? So it's digital decibels in in audio, which goes from negative infinity to 0. So 0 dB is clipping, and there's no going above 0. It's not like analog where you can kind of push it and the analog circuits will kind of fake it for you, and you'll get this kind of cool overdrive sort of sound. You don't get cool overdrive sound when you overdrive digital circuits. You just get noise, and it's nasty. Anytime you've run a mic really, really hot and recorded it, and you hear what you get from it, that's digital distortion. It stinks, and it's really hard to get rid of. Like, only impossible. I've used one plugin that's managed to do a decent job of pulling it back from the brink. So yeah, it's a lot more complicated. I mean, if the person that wants to reveal themselves can clarify the whole working at 100% volume, I can take a follow up to this, but otherwise I'm just gonna move on. Y'all good? Okay, I'll take that as done. So when fixing plosives, how do you know when it's better to use the amplified methods versus the EQ or vice versa? And what issues or specific things do you look for that cause you to require one or the other? So you got to understand the homework example with the plosives is pretty exaggerated. And usually what you're going to find is that experimentation. So this is the key right here. I mean, for any of this stuff, experimentation is kind of the thing. It's like if you're going to, you want to experiment. You don't just want to take a preset and just use it blindly. You should try a few things, preview some of these effects that you're screwing around with, dial something that you've never dialed before, and see if it changes it. Does it sound better? Maybe that's a good idea. I mean, yes, there's a certain amount of you can at least educate yourself on what those knobs should mean in terms of what they're doing to the audio when you're messing with it. But yeah, generally speaking, experimentation and a combination can give pretty good quality results. The plosive thing for the homework was really, I mean, it's almost impossible to get great results out of that. I mean, it's horribly distorted because he's basically standing like this far from the mic and he's going, anticipate financial problems. It's like, holy crap, you're just like, you're getting it. It's really crazy. So I understand. If you have no audio recording equipment and you have to record audio as a video file, is there any way to unlink the audio from the video outside Premiere Pro in order to work with it in Audition? You can load. There are tools outside of Premiere that can help you extract audio, but usually speaking, I mean, the easy way to do it is to, and some of the tools are cheap, some of them are free, but I generally, if I need to split audio, I would load the media in Premiere. It is something that you could do. You could load this. You could load all your clips into Adobe Media Encoder and encode the audio and just basically take the audio out. And you can encode it as WAV files or AIF. And then now you've got basically audio of your video that you can just import directly if you want. That works. And you've already, it's a tool you already have. So there you go. And audio extraction from video clips is something we're going to talk about. Why do you recommend exporting between Premiere Pro and Audition instead of using the dynamic link feature? Again, I'm going to go into that tonight, so I'm going to skip this one. And that is the end of that. So, yes.
I had a question about one of the exercises. The noise reduction, capture noise print tool. So in the video from Linda, he did the capture noise print twice. And I don't understand why he did that. He did it first, then he highlighted everything, and then he went to the process. And then he said, don't use the custom, but to default. And then he had to do the noise print again.
I think it said he botched his capturing of the noise print the first time, is what I think happened there.
Change it to default.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So, yeah, that's not a trick. Usually when you're working with the noise reduction, the process noise reduction, you're going to capture sound print or the noise print once. You don't want to capture it. You don't need to capture it repeatedly unless you do the same mistake you did.
So you captured once.
Yes.
Go to
Then you would unselect it so that the audio that you had selected for the noise print was now it's the entire clip, and then you can go back into the FX, noise reduction and process noise reduction, and then it will use the noise print that you've already created.
Leave it on custom.
Yeah.
Right, and then you just click on.
And then you can click on apply, or you can preview it, or whatever. I mean,
That's
yeah.
really dumb.
Yes, I know.
I think it's an older version.
It's an older version, but it's a pretty old tutorial.
There's a
So
new tab on there when you do that, that says that it doesn't see it hasn't been defined yet, and you go ahead and there's a tab that you can hit it that says print it, and you don't have to go back and forth and do that.
yeah, that is something that they've improved on the version that was in the tutorial.
And one more question: is there a benefit of like working on the sound before you, beforehand, and then go into Premiere Pro, or does it not matter really? You work, open everything in Premiere Pro, and then you go. Render it in.
That's a really good question. I think that generally speaking, for most, all right, here's where I'm going to I'll probably piss myself off in the future by saying this, but my future self is going to beat me up when I say this. I think that what you should consider is if you're planning on doing all of the audio work yourself, you can use the send clip to Audition from Premiere once it's loaded in Premiere. So you would go in, you could, if you know that you're going to need to work on the entire audio for that clip, you'd go into your media and maybe, no, I don't have my stuff loaded. So, well, what I'll do is I'll start it and see if I can get to the point where I can talk it, intelligently about this. But you're going to load your media import your media into Premiere. Then before you lay it into a sequence or something, you can go in and you can send that full clip to Audition and go and process for noise reduction or sound removal, whatever you want to do. But just understand that when you then you're going to bring in, you have to re-import the finished file, the file that you save in Audition, you have to re-import into the project separately from the original clip. It's a thing. I mean, that's part of why that's why my future self is probably going to, take me out in the alley and beat the crap out of me when I say this. But the idea of using this kind of, I'll just quickly send the file over to Premiere or send it to Audition and work on it, and then I'll save it and then I'll go back. It's like, all right, but I mean, you start to lose track of where your media is, and that runs afoul of what we did in the first week, which is know where your damn media is. So yeah.
And then the other question is, if you were to do that, you start in Premiere Pro and you worked on a bunch of audio stuff, and then you bring all of the audio into
Audition.
And then when you bring it back, it's just gonna import the whole audio file?
We're going to talk about that tonight.
But it doesn't put it right back to where it was.
No, we're going to talk about that exact thing.
That's really,
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it. So you're going to learn something. That's good. All right. So, all right. Yes, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to get to that. I want to start by actually going into talking about. Let's talk about this, and we'll see where it lands us in relation to how we deal with this moving of audio from one program to the other. Okay, so what we're going to talk about this week is comparing the multi-track audio capabilities. And of course, I am not prepared. Hang on. Come on. Nope. All right. Give me a second here. Volumes. Good. Oh, well, whatever. All right. I'm going to have to plug that in a second. So when we get to the point of doing a demo, I'm going to have to take a quick moment. So we're going to compare multi-track audio, how it works in Premiere, how it works in Audition. Then we're going to talk a little bit about sound effects, and that's hopefully going to take up more time, including how to spot for it, finding sound effects, recording your own, creating from scratch. Then we can talk about placing and editing, and then the idea of refining your content by adding, when you add audio effects to sound effects, and you're like, that doesn't make sense, but we'll try and make sense of it. Okay, so first of all, when you talk about multi-track audio in Premiere and Audition, the good news is that there's more similarities than there are differences. So, and I may have mentioned this already, but if I haven't, then I'm mentioning it now. Simple projects generally don't need to be moved from Premiere. You can do a lot of audio work in Premiere, and so long as your audio is good, you're starting with good, clean audio from your production. If there's no like savagery you need to do to it, there's a lot you can actually get away with just leaving your mix inside of Premiere. Now, that said, if you are going to work on more complicated projects, or that you have a post-production team or a partner or a vendor that you're basically working with, there's some great post-production sound. And I will tell you, PSA, for the documentary film festival, we're having an audio panel discussion for audio for documentary, and one of the guys is this guy Jim Lebrecht is going to be there, and he's got 2 films that are nominated, where he's a sound mixer, that are nominated for Oscars this year. Okay, 2 films of his are nominated for Oscars, and he's going to be at our film festival the weekend during spring break. So you want to learn from somebody who knows what he's talking about. This is the time to do it. All right, so back to the program. So complicated projects should absolutely be moved to a full-time digital audio workstation, such as Audition, but 10 out of 10 pros don't use Audition, so go figure. So how do you export? And then how do you re-import from, once you've exported and you've done your work, how do you get it back in? And that's where we're going to talk about kind of what happens, right? Because it's all this sleight of hand and you're thinking, what? So yeah, that's the first thing. So multi-track audio. Woohoo. Similarities. So let's talk about some of the similarities. Now, for that, I am going to have to, like I said, I'm going to step around back here, blah, blah, blah. Sleight of hand, don't mind what the left hand's doing. The right hand's doing something else. All right. And at some point, I'm probably going to capitulate and go crying off to my mom. So, all right, let's browse. I'm going to basically pull up a demo right here just for purposes of looking at. Come on, there we go. Nope. Really? You don't want to open this project? Oh, I see how you are. Okay, fine. Oh, I'm canceling a new project. Never mind. Let's open a project instead. All right. This is fascinating. I know you're like, ooh, this is the best time ever. All right, here we go. We're opening this project up. Yeah, complain all you want. I'm still opening you. Okay, so when you come into Premiere and you click on the audio workspace up here, there's a lot that it provides that kind of is going to seem very similar to what you're doing up here. Let me turn off the lights so that you guys can kind of see what I'm wrapping on here. All right. Tilt this down too so it's a little easier. All right, so what are you looking at here? You're looking at, obviously we have a sequence. It is currently freaking out trying to conform all of the audio clips, which is, again, when you talk about, if you ever see, boy, I'm just all about doing this in order, aren't I? You'd think that there's going to come a time in this semester where I'll walk in the door and I will be prepared when you first sit down with me. So Okay, there we go. So when you first load up a project, you come down here to this bottom area, and you're going to see it's going to say conforming, and it's going to say the names of these clips. It's basically, it's the first time this computer has seen this project. It's going to take all of the media that's in that project, and it's going to run it into the media cache, into the Adobe Media Cache. And so that's when it's saying, you're seeing this little blue bar down here at the bottom, where it's telling you, I'm conforming all of these clips. It's like, that's what it's doing, is it is loading up the Adobe Media Cache so that it understands what it's looking at. Now that it's loaded, these used to be just blue bars, and now they have all the waveform information loaded. That's part of the media cache. That's part of this loading task that it does in the background when you first open a project. Okay, so let me zoom back out of this so it's not so headache-inducing. What are we looking at here? So you have in your sequence, this is a very simple sequence. Okay, let's just kind of dispense with the video and just look at the audio sequence. And let's even zoom it further. We'll just do this so that you guys can see. Oops, wrong. There we go. All right. So what are we looking at here? We have 2 tracks of audio, and that is largely the 2 audio sources that I had created when I filmed this. So this was production audio, and this was recorded on camera. But since I only had 2 audio sources, and it was interview footage, it wasn't narrative. This is the Chimera video, so it's just this dude talking about this makerspace. And so you're like, how complicated do I want to make this? I've got a nice production camera. It's got halfway decent audio. I'm running audio into the camera. So I've got 2 audio sources, both of the same thing. One's a boom microphone, a shotgun mic on a boom, and then the other is a lav. Then the other thing I've got is this music bed in a 3rd channel. Super simple. This sort of project I wouldn't move out of Premiere. I would just leave it here and mix it here. So what else do you see here? Do you guys notice anything? Let me zoom it this way so that it's a little more obvious what we're talking about. Is there anything obvious at all? Yeah.
You animate the decibel volumes for the sound.
You see some automation, don't you? So you see some automation of the clip. So that's what he's talking about. Is you see there's some basically keyframes that are basically embedded in this. This looks like I was probably riding a slider and just basically writing the value of that slider over the track as I was listening to it. So I might have had headphones on, or I might have had some monitor speakers that I'm playing this, and then I'm dipping the sound down, and then when he stops talking, I give it a little bump and I bring it back up. So that's what this looks like. There's also, what is this up here? What is that? Oh, so it's apparently I'm doing some kind of a volume pump on these as well, or I just did a volume duck on his when he was talking, and for some reason this is the default value. I don't remember what I did there, so that's kind of wild. It happens, trust me. So the other thing that you'll notice, what are these on either end of this?
Crossfades.
I've added crossfades to the beginning and end of every single audio clip. Maybe I didn't do it on the music bed, sue me. But everything, so why do you think I would do that? Anybody? Again, go for it, man.
Clear transition between the audio clips.
Yeah. So what if this was well, the particular thing you're trying to avoid is any kind of sudden pop. So at the beginning of an audio clip, sometimes if the audio clip is in the middle of a wave, the amplitude is not 0, and you drop that clip into a sequence, when the playhead hits it, it's going to go boom, and it's going to pop, and you'll hear a pop or a click, and you're going to be like, that sounds weird. So that's the reason why you should always put front and end fades on your audio so that you come into the sound, you hear what you need to hear, and then you cut it out. Sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes you don't have a lot of room. Sometimes you're trying to cut between words, and I get it, but you still should do it. Even if it's for, you know, a frame or 2 frames, you can still do a fade. And because understand something, how many, okay, so this is another trivia question. How many samples of audio would you figure are for every single frame of video? What should there be? If you're doing 24 frames a second of camera, how many samples of audio should you have per frame? Anybody? Go ahead.
16.
How many?
16-bit, 48 kilohertz.
It's 48 kilohertz. Yeah, you're onto something, but that's not that's why you have a certain number of samples per frame. So you have 24 frames, you have 48 kilohertz. Do you think something divides into one into the other? Yeah, back. That's not exactly getting it, but I understand what you're trying to say. So I'll let you guys off the hook. Every frame of audio, if you're running 48 kilohertz audio, every frame is going to have 2,000 audio samples. 2,000 audio samples per frame. You think you can interpolate from 0 to full volume in 2,000 samples? So that's why even if you have 1 frame, so this is several frames. I mean, I don't even know how many. This is 6 frames of audio or 6 frames of video that I'm fading over. That's like an eternity in audio. I've got, you know, multiply that by 2,000. I've got 12,000 audio samples between absolute silence and full volume. Nice, smooth transition. So don't feel like, oh, I've only got 1 frame, or even, you know, you can go subframe on some of that weirdness, and that's beyond the scope of this. But so the idea of adding a fade, adding crossfades, or at least fading up from silence and back to silence before and after every clip, important. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't important. Okay. What else are we looking at here? So, all right, well, that kind of does it for this. At least I had the sensibility to fade to silence on the end of the audio, and then I just kind of dropped off a cliff for the automation. So, all right, well, that certainly is something. Let's bring this back in line so that we can kind of see what we're doing again. Okay, so I'm just using the plus and minus keys here. So plus to zoom width wide, minus to move back, and then I hold down the Option or Alt key, and I do plus and minus for this, and that just zooms vertically your audio tracks. Pro tip: it does not change your video tracks. For that one, you'll hold down the Control or Command, and you'll plus and minus for that. So these are just kind of nice keyboard shortcuts. There was a point I kind of quit doing it, but if you guys are interested, I can put up some. There might be some resources in Canvas about this, where I put up some shortcuts for Premiere, keyboard shortcuts. Good editors should always be able to make their way around using as much of the keyboard as possible. That's how you become agile and fast. You have dexterity, is not through the use of this little, you know, hockey puck on the table. You're not going to be as fast moving this around as you are moving this around, because I'd have to come over here and screw and kind of go, well, okay, making it look like this, or I can just do Alt plus and minus, and I'm there. I get what I want. All right. So the things that you have information that's on each of your audio tracks. Okay, sometimes there's crossfades, sometimes there's automation, meaning some volume adjustments. Sometimes it might be panning or stereo imaging adjustments. Who knows? All right, so I tell you what, because we're coming up on 7:45, what I'd like you guys to try is if you guys go back to the class 1 homework on the server, so you guys can log in. So just quick reminder, you guys can log in to the Gemini server. Take a look at that. Even if you, so if you guys want to do it, you can do it as CS74.21, no password, hit connect. Class data files, CS74.21C, go to class 1, week 1 homework files. I want you to get this folder and drag it to your desktop. Okay? In your copious free time, I get it. You guys are all like, what? So yeah, so the fast track was log in to the server using the CS24_20 or 74_21 user, then connect to it, go to this folder, the class 1, week 1 homework files, and pull this folder down to your desktop, because this way you guys can follow along. So I'm you know, if I'm going to flounder, you guys should flounder with me. Yeah. The name of the folder, it's really ugly, but it's Chimera Crowdfunding 2017-0117. All right, yeah. So, of course, this is the one. That is the one I want you guys to grab. Okay, so while you're doing that, I'm gonna get back to this. So the other thing that's interesting to point out is that you have this mixer panel up here, and you have they have 2 mixers. Well, there's 2 mixers in here. One's called the audio clip mixer, and the other's called the audio track mixer. The audio clip mixer is actually kind of useful for, well, and of course I'm going to mute this so that we don't have to listen to my friend Dana talk about how cool Chimera is. But what you'll notice is that for any audio that you select, and or especially if you are down here, you should, oh, I see, it's not showing the automation. So we can write keyframes. We should show keyframes. I thought we would show these. All right, it's not playing the way I want to. That's fine. So notice that the audio clip player, the important thing to kind of take away from this right now is that the audio clip player, notice what happens if you're at the 0 time index on the playhead. You have 3 audio channels or 3 audio tracks, right? But 2 of them are kind of grayed out and disabled, and one of them has something in it. One of them is live. You you have a slider that you can do something with, right? The reason why that is because this has to do with whether or not there's media in any of these audio channels. So this is the clip mixer for, hey, there's my save project going. This is the audio clip mixer, which just deals with individual clips that are under the playhead. So if I wanted to adjust the volume of any of these clips, notice that now that I have the playhead under on this point where I have 3 audio clips under the playhead, all 3 of these are lit up, and I can do things with them. I can change the stereo imaging. I can change the level. I can do all sorts of things. So notice, and the other thing I want you to see is that when you look at this, so you'll see that you've got watch this line right here as I slide this slider down. I've just moved that line down by moving this slider up here. So what I'm doing by changing the values here on the audio clip mixer, I'm actually changing the values for that clip in the timeline. This is an important thing to kind of get, okay? So this is just one of those, this is what you'll see. When the timeline is off, so you'll notice that as we animate through this, you'll see that the time or the volume of this slider is going to increase, and then it disables once the clip is the playhead's off that clip. This one's dark, it's grayed out. Any questions on this? Audio clip mixer. The second one is the audio track mixer. It's a totally different beast. This is actually deals with just the audio tracks themselves. It doesn't care what's in the audio tracks at all. It only has to deal with individual channels of audio on these or tracks of audio, because they could have multiple channels each. So you'll have audio A1, A2, and A3, and again you'll see A1, A2, and A3, but then there's this other one here that says master. What's that all about? So understand that each audio track basically has a destination. Okay, so, and by default, all audio tracks are basically mixed down to your master track, and then that's what's basically, when you go to export your project, the master is what's being exported as your audio track for your project. So if for some reason you've muted a track, like this track here is muted, you get, there's no audio from this is going to make it to the master mix. So I'll play a little bit of this, and you'll see that these two audio pieces, and now you start to see that. So what you notice is that actually the automation that we saw earlier, this automation here is actually on the track is being automated, not the clip. Okay. So you'll see that over time, as we move, as the playhead moves, you'll watch this this slider right here, and it moves up, it just bumps it, and it moves back down when he starts talking again. So you can automate tracks in terms of volume, pitch, or other, but this is where things can get really kind of out of hand. So you'll see that you have you have audio levels for each of these. You have levels separate. These audio levels are actually distinct from these audio levels, all right? So you have an audio level for the clip, which is kind of like your, how loud is this piece of media? And then you have the audio track level, which is basically saying, well, for this audio track, which all has music in it, I don't want that to ever get louder than -12. So you always would have this running, well, actually in this case, this one runs between -15 and -9, it looks like. Yeah, -15 right now. And then when it's between things, okay, I'll give it a -7. Okay, so you start to see that as it moves, as we move down the project, you'll see, and I'm just looking at this number right here, as the playhead moves, you'll see that that value goes from -15 to about -7, and that is how loud my music ever gets. I can turn my audio, any audio on that track, as loud as I want, and it's never going to get louder than this in the mix, because the track mixer has it set at -6, -7.
And where do you set that?
You go up here to the audio track mixer, okay, which is distinct from the audio clip mixer. So, and you have a lot of the same controls. You have a lot more controls actually. So it's not identical, but it's very close. So if you were to look at them, you have an audio panning, you have mutes and solos and writing keyframes, enabling keyframe writing. You have values that correspond to these sliders as well. Same things here. You have the left-right spread, you have mutes, and then you have this record. What's that? And then you also have sliders, values, and so on. Yeah.
So while you're editing, while you're doing the mix down for the audio, while adjusting the sliders, then will automatically add the tick marks for the audio to go up and go down for. Yes.
Yes. If you set it to write keyframes, it will. Notice that's what this part right here is. So when you're looking at this point where it says write keyframes, you can click this and it will enable keyframes for that audio clip. Or you can come here and switch this automation mode for a track, and you have options here. And we won't go into too much about what the difference is here. But if you wanted to if you wanted to modify these while the project's playing, I'll demo it. So normally when you're playing a project, you can pull this down and it's going to basically just pull right back up to where it was in the automation. Okay. So notice that it's ignoring my changes. It's just basically you see that it's pulling it back down to the automation level. Okay, that's what read automation does. It basically ignores any changes that you make. Well, it doesn't ignore them, but just it will basically try and bring it back into line with the keyframe value for that track is set to. Now, if you switch this to latch, what happens is you start pressing play, and the minute that you start to pull this, maybe I want to pull it down, notice it stays there. And then it comes back up, and maybe I want to make it really loud, and then I kind of get weird. And so as soon as you do that, notice that what happened when we changed this, when we wrote, is that we basically have modified those keyframes. This is where I was getting all weird and seesawing the, I'll zoom in here so that you can kind of see how I changed that audio. So you see this is where I maximized it, and then I was kind of sliding it up and down real fast. It recorded every single move of that slider. That's what latch does, okay? I'm gonna undo that so it doesn't seem so crazy. So does that make sense to anybody? So you can change the automation mode for a track, and then you can go back and play the track, and only the changes you make will be recorded. There's a couple other ones where write will just basically overwrite, and touch, I think, if I remember, touch is it will try and resume the automation when you make a change. So it will do like read in that once you let go of the slider, it'll bring it back in line with the existing automation, the existing keyframes. But if you hold it, if you hold the key, if you hold the mouse down on the slider, as long as you're holding that mouse on the slider, it's going to hold that level until you hit stop, until you stop playback. Yeah.
So you'd only want to do this with the music. You wouldn't want to do this without.
Oh no, you could do this with dialogue or anything. You could do it. I mean.
So for audio one, if you were to do that right now, I mean that would, if you were just going to write it out, listen to the whole track without stopping, that's just going to change everything. It's going to do the same thing, basically.
Yeah, it would do the same thing, but understand that, I mean, yes, and you also have some existing automation for the individual clips that you've recorded, and this is totally separate from that. So you have the keyframes that are on the audio, like these bits right here. These will stay there even if I record this. So for sake of argument, let's do that. So we'll turn this to latch, and then and notice what's going to happen is it's going to basically kind of do its own thing, where I'm totally messing with Dana's audio, and I'm like, yeah, this is not a particularly wise way to. And of course, you're going to ask, where's the automation, Randy? Part of it is that you have. You notice what happens when we zoom the audio tracks a little bit more. If I do this, it'll be a little more obvious. So as you keep zooming these audio tracks, oops, hello. There we go. So as you keep zooming them in, what you'll notice is that as you get to that point, you have more options here. There's a lot more controls than when it's collapsed. When it's collapse like this, it starts to kind of eliminate those pieces. So I'm going to go all the way down and come all the way back out. Okay, so now they're all the same size. So once you've zoomed to a significant height, some additional controls show up, including showing which keyframes you want to display on screen. So notice that the automation that I just did isn't showing. That's because the keyframes that I'm showing are the clip keyframes. But if I came down here to here we go, track keyframes and volume, there's the automation that I had. Okay, so it removes the automation for the individual clips. Doesn't remove it, but it just hides it in terms of visibility. So for this, I'm looking at the track automation for that channel, and now I can go back to the clip automation. And then you're back to seeing the keyframes for those clips. Doesn't mean the automation is missing, it's just hidden, and you have to be able to switch it. And you can also usually get to it through, maybe you can't. Maybe right now, this is all I'm going to show you. Yeah, because I gotta move on. So a lot of what I'm showing you is identical to what you're going to see in Audition. That's the good news. Is these are the similarities. These are absolutely the sorts of things that you're going to run into, and you're going to see, and you're going to feel comfortable, and that's a good thing. All right, so let's get to the end of this this part, and then we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about Audition, and then we'll talk about sound effects. So the other thing about the audio track mixer is that you have this whole section up here that has basically what it boils down to an effects rack. What they call this sort of look in the digital audio workstation world is a channel strip. Okay, so you have 3 tracks right now. You might have a dozen, you might have 20, you might have 40. Feature films, man, they can get crazy. You'll have individual tracks for one sound, though. Why you would do that? Only post audio people know for sure. So you have the ability to add effects to, and notice that I've added some. There's a couple of effects on here. Each of these has, I guess, 5 effect slots and then 5 sends, and we're not going to really talk much about sends, but when you talk about a particular effect, come on, hello, I want to see my effect. Where's my effect? There it is. Okay, why isn't the multiband? Oh, I think they've changed that. This is an older version. I'll have to update that. So, but anyway, when you're looking at a particular effect, when you double click it in the rack here, it'll pop up a control for it. And so notice that I've added a vocal enhancer for his audio, and it has some presets. Well, it really only has 3 buttons, and so which vocal enhancer do you wish to use? There's no knobs to tweak. There's only 3 presets. So, and you can temporarily turn that effect off by bypassing it, which is this little power button. So if it has a slash through it, it's being bypassed. If it is not, it is enabled. And also, when you're dealing with these older effects, you sometimes can notice that you have a knob down here, and any of the settings for that control, that effect, are available on this list. Usually, that's kind of the geeky tweak sort of way to do it. Most of the time, you want to use a nice multi-brand compressor like this. Okay, this is what I was expecting to see when I hit that button. So you have the ability to shape your sound based on what they're, and so this is a little bit of an audio geek sort of feel when I'm dealing with mic audio or lav, and I want to use it. There's a certain amount of EQ and or compression that I like to dump on it. That's why it's in place. Finally, for this master track, I've added what's called a mastering effect, and in here, you can there's some final bits that you can make it sound. Make it sound pretty nice. I mean, for what Premiere offers you out of the box, this is a damn good little plugin for mastering audio. It's really a great thing to experiment with. Not going to go into detail here. The thing that I didn't get to but is available to you, obviously, is the ability to, I see y'all twitching in your seats. I'll get to this. Just hang tight. We're almost there. Is the ability to, come on, Randy. Make it happen, Randy. Where is it? Add tracks. Okay, so when you're in a sequence, you can add. You do have the option of adding these audio submix tracks, okay? And so what is an audio submix? Anybody have an idea why you might want to use an audio submix? No? No ideas. You guys are definitely ready for a break. Okay, cool. So I'll tell you why you might want an audio submix. Say, for instance, you have individual mics on all of your principal actors. You want all of your dialogue to end up on one you want to end it up on one place so that you can do some final tweaking on all of the audio for dialogue at once. So you would send all of your individual tracks of dialogue to a dialogue submix, and then you can do a little bit more with it. It's just like adding another track that you can then do some more things with and play with. When you do that, you can add you can add up to as many as you want, but I mean, maybe we'll add 2 submixes, and in this case, they're going to be stereo because, like I said, this is for YouTube. So when we click OK, suddenly I also accidentally added an audio track. So I'm gonna redo that. Let me do that again. What happened is that I automatically added a video track and an audio track, neither of which I want, but I do want 2 audio submix tracks. So just make sure that you do that and then click OK. And now I've got audio 1, 2, 3, submix 1, submix 2, and master. Okay, these are just the same kinds of mixes that you have for all of the others. So these are just like 2 more channel strips that you've added, and you can automate those. You can pan them around the stereo image. You can add effects to them. So there's more effects racks that you can dump on them and you can go overboard with. How do you use them is actually right up here where you notice that underneath the rack, you'll see that it says track output assignment. So let's say that audio 1 and 2, because they're dialogue, we'll put them in a submix 1. And then and now they say submix 1, and then we'll take the music and put it in submix 2. And notice that you can actually assign submixes to other submixes, and it can get crazy. So don't get crazy. But what you will notice now is that when you press play, is that now my music is playing over in submix 1, and nothing's going out the master. What the hell? What did I do? I broke it. All right. No, I didn't break it. But why are you being that way? Don't be that way. Be awesome. Let's be awesome instead. All right. Well, I'll figure out what I did. Normally, you want to set up your mixes and submixes when you're setting your project up. But now you'll notice that all of my dialogue, which is really only 1, if I unmuted this, then both of these would be playing to that submix. So if I mute this submix or if I mute the music, you'll notice that just dialogue is playing out of this one. And then if I mute these, now it's just music playing out of the second submix. You can rename these, so you can kind of go MX and DX, if you guys remember from last week. Now you should know exactly what this submix is about, right? Because it's got the 2-letter code that tells you. So that is how you set up your audio mixing inside of Premiere. It is crash course. I mean, this is a very deep subject by comparison. Just the effects alone, you'll notice that you have a fair number of, you even have some noise reduction, but understand that these are real-time noise reduction. This is not like the process noise reduction we do in Audition. They do have, and I know that in the latest version, this is 2017, notice that they've added all these obsolete sound effects. That multi-band compressor that I had over here before, it was under this obsoleted one. So it's grandfathered in. If you have it in a previous project, it shows up. But if you try and access it, you're not going to see anything. If you want to do new stuff, you would come in through the new amplitude and compression. And the multi-band compressor that they show here is actually this is the one from Audition now. So they've actually brought effects in from Audition into Premiere so that like I said, if your projects are not that complicated, you can do a lot. I mean, there's a lot you can do with just this software. That said, not every project's going to work this way. All right, let's take a break. Let's now transition a bit so what we had talked about before were the similarities. So this is why I'll bring this back up so that we can kind of review. So the similarities that we've looked at to this point, the audio track channel strips, Audition obviously has more of them, which is arguable, but still. Automation, the keyframes work very similarly in terms of you have write, you have latch, you have touch, all those track automations and clip automations. You have all of that in Audition as well. And the mixers, you also have submixes, you have effects racks, you have sends, which I don't really go into, and you have your master. Okay, so you have all of that in Audition as well as what I showed you in Premiere. That's the good news. All right, so the bad news is there's a pretty significant differences too. Audition is just for audio. It doesn't really care all that much about the video. You can add a video track to it, but really it's just one video that plays, picture. So you're not going to have like multiple video tracks and other stuff that you can transition or stack or composite or any of that other garbage. You don't do that on Audition. That's not what it's for. You can render a small, a miniature version of your picture file of your cut, and you could send that with your audio. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So Audition has the ability to deal with more tracks. Again, that's debatable. Really, you're only limited by how much memory you stuff inside your computer. But like I said, Audition just does audio. That's why I say that. You have the ability to color tracks and group them a little more easily inside of Audition. You have more effects. In fact, you have a lot more. And they're arguably of better quality, with the caveat that I gave you before the break, which was some of these effects have been pulled into Premiere and replaced the ones that were there already. So a lot of that is not as relevant. But again, you do have the idea of these processed effects that we went into last week: noise reduction, sound removal, and a bunch of others that you can process your audio files, those individual audio clips, and then have, leave them in the mix, and then you can dump them out when you down mix. You have the Audition. Realistically, Audition doesn't talk about track bouncing, but what you will hear with Pro Tools people is the idea of, oh, I've got to bounce those tracks. This is an old post-audio terminology, which has to do with when you were dealing with a lot of older digital audio workstations. They didn't have a infinite number of tracks. And sooner or later, you started to bump up against the ability of the computer. It would slow the computer down to the point where you needed to try and regain some sanity. So what you do is you disable some tracks and mix them down to new tracks that you would then work with. And those would be what they call bouncing them. You bounce these tracks, which has to do with how you used to plug, you patch these old 8-track, 4-track, 24-track recorders, and you'd be patching them all together so that you could take existing tracks that you've recorded and then re-record them to a single track or a pair, and then keep on going. Yeah?
Are you daring to talk about analog tape?
No.
Oh.
No, we're not going to talk about analog tape because you know more than I do about that.
Where it comes from.
I know that's where it comes from. I had an old 4-track, 4-track cassette deck, man. I used to do this.
2-track, 3-track.
Yeah. And you realize you can I can get 6 tracks on a 4-track or 8 tracks on a 4-track. It's like, Jesus. Exactly. Yeah, I know. There's so many old songs that were done on these just ridiculously tiny pieces of equipment. And you think, God, people used that back then? I know. Yeah. All right. And then the other part of this is there's a notion of generating stubs. Does anybody have an idea what a stub is? An audio stub? No? Okay. An audio stub in this case is one of those submixes where you're dealing with, or if you're dealing with a multi-track, a multi-channel output, like a 5.1 output, you would have stubs for each channel of that mix. So if you did a stereo mix, you'd have an L channel and an R channel. Those would be stubs. For a 5.1, you'd have your left, your center, your right, and then your rear surround, your right, your left surround, and your low frequency. So your subwoofer, your boom track. All right, so that is all part of this as well. So how do you move from one project to another? Okay, how do you move from Premiere Pro to Audition? There's really two generally accepted ways. So you can export as what they call an OMF, and I don't remember what OMF stands for off the top of my head, but it doesn't really matter. It's basically an interchange format between software applications, and it's relatively open in terms of most audio workstations know what to do with an OMF file. The other is you could use Adobe's dynamic link, and this is Randy's first slide on the evils of Adobe Dynamic Link. So let's talk briefly about what this means. So why is Adobe a dynamic link evil? Is that part of it is that it's not terribly compatible. For it to work, each software application expects that they're on the same version or the same computer, actually, physically on the same computer, or accessible over, like a shared network drive. So it's like you could have two workstations using a shared network drive, and the project and all the media is on that network drive, and they could just pull them individually. You could do that. Not a great idea, but you could. You also have a notion of version compatibility, which is that anytime there's a new release of the software, the previous version of the software is now completely, if you try to dynamic link. So for instance, if you try to dynamically link from the latest version of Premiere and you go, oh, send that off to Adobe Audition, but you didn't have the latest version of Adobe Audition installed, you actually won't be able to do that. It won't work. So that's a big drawback in my book. The other things is that if the link gets corrupted, and it does, usually that has to do with the project file getting messed up. I've had this happen, and it's maddening. That's where having that backup, where you can kind of go back to the latest, 5 minutes ago where it wasn't broken, you could recover that way. But if the project file gets renamed, so if the Audition project file that you bounce to from the dynamic link gets renamed, that can screw you up. If the media files get moved, sometimes that'll screw you up. I mean, if any of those, it's super brittle, and it's just like, man, just don't do it. So, all right, I've now pontificated on why you shouldn't use this. So in that case, what we'll do, and I'll demo this, but I'm just running through kind of what we're going to talk about here, is you'll take the OMFs, you're going to export it from Premiere, you'll import it into Audition, and we'll talk a little bit about what settings get imported from Premiere into Audition and what effects, if any, get imported. And usually that's a function of how it gets saved more than how you import it, but all right. And then we're going to do the work. We're not going to actually do the work in class, but this is where you would, you'd produce your multi-track audio. You'd use the mixers and submixers to set up your bass lines. And what I mean baseline here is just like your bass mix. The basic mix is like, that you want your music bed to be a certain level, so you set it in the submix. That way, you're not going to go above it. And if for some reason your client or you are listening to it and go, that whole music bed should be louder, you can go to the submix and lift it, and then your whole music bed is louder now. And you can still have all of the cute automation that you do where you duck and you lift, for the people speaking. You can add fades at that point. You can add room tone if you have it. God, please make sure you have it. You can add any effects. You can automate. Then you can master the mix, and then you write out your stubs. So that is the general workflow here. Okay. And once you've done that, you're going to, and then that's the next section. We're not going to do that yet. We're going to stop here, and what we'll do is now I'm going to reload that project in Premiere. So here we are. I know, magic. Okay, so we're looking at this this project in Premiere. We've got some automation already on this, right? So we've already got some track automation, which is crazy. So let's undo that. Let's actually revert this. Okay, so I'm going to revert this to the previously saved version. It's going to reload it and complain, and there we go. Okay, so now we are, you'll see that the original file that I had pulled off of the server is restored. Let's export this. So you got to go to Sequence, Export, and OMF. There is also an AAF, which is, I believe, that's an Avid interchange format. So if you know absolutely beyond a reasonable doubt that you're going to take this over to Avid Pro Tools, you can export this, and this can be loaded into Pro Tools. But Pro Tools will also take an OMF, so it's not like it's that big of an advantage. That's why I don't show you guys this. And I really am not going to show you the Final Cut Pro XML. I'm really not, because that's messed up. It's better than it used to be, but it's still messy. I mean, it's such a disaster trying to move projects between Adobe and Apple right now. Just look at your editor really, really deeply in their eyes and say you don't want to be using that. Okay, so when you export as an OMF, I'm going to turn the lights back off. Hang on, because you guys should be able to see. Don't fall asleep. I know it's getting late. But... All right. So you're gonna create an OMF. You get to give it a title. Hopefully, you have a better title than Sequence 1. Maybe this is Final Picture, or what I've seen other people do is, Picture Final, which is usually the third time that they've sent this to audio post, right? It's going to give you, again, the option for what's the audio sample rate, what's the bits per sample, what do you want? Do you want the files to be embedded or separate? Usually for OMF, it's okay to do embed. If the project is gigantic, you might really consider doing them separate, because otherwise it's going to be one gigantic file versus a bunch of discrete files. But then again, if you bundle all of the media into the OMF, then when you hand that OMF off, you know you've given them everything, and they're not going to come back to you and say, well, this audio is missing, because it was in the damn OMF. Yeah.
Isn't there a 2 gig limit on OMF?
No, I don't believe so. I think that has more to do with the file system than the OMF. I thought that had more to do with the file system than OMF. You could be right, but then again, remember that audio doesn't take up that much room.
Now, they was talking about when they had a whole lot of files together.
Yeah.
You have to break them up. Sometimes it's in separate OMF.
Wouldn't be surprising. You could also do. You could send parts of it of Sequence, or this can be that's actually an interesting aside.
The whole sequence with 4 tracks, and then you send it again with that 4 through 8.
Oh, gross. Yeah. I suppose you could do that. That would be messed up though for me. All right. The other thing that you can do in terms of how you export it is you could. The option is you can copy the complete audio file, which is the original audio clips, get embedded into the OMF, or you can trim them, which is just the audio that's in the sequence. So if for any reason you cut the beginning and end of an audio file, whether that's from camera audio or from the music bed or any of that stuff, it won't be in the OMF, and it's not going to go to the mixer. But generally speaking, now this is where this is actually the actual answer to this, is that the OMF that you're sending is this is kind of the first pass. Generally, also you're going to have you're going to also send all of the audio files that you have from production as well separately. Okay, so the audio post folks are going to get the OMF, and they're also going to get all of your audio files anyway, because more times than not, they might go looking for stuff in your audio in the original audio files if they're looking for a different word or a different take of audio or different room tone or whatever. You need to be able to provide all of those to these guys as well. Okay, so the OMF is the first pass of this, but for a small project like this, we definitely can do the embed and copy the complete audio files. Notice that it has this little checkbox here. It says include pan. What do you think include pan might do? Oh, okay. You know, you guys are really interactive tonight. Awesome. So that's actually going to basically, for any of these tracks, it's going to include the pan for those individual, the pan setting for those clips. Not necessarily the automation though. Let's talk about that. So let's create this. So we'll click OK, and then we're going to save this sequence as an OMF. And yep, picture final, absolutely final, the last final, the ultra final. I've seen them all. It's great fun. You save it as a file format OMF and then away off to the races. So, oh, look, this is not fatal and export is still valid. Oh, okay. Audio sources start time is a negative value. You can usually ignore these, but always read if you do get some export warnings. You should check these. So basically, I think this has to do with the fact that I did some automation at the end of the audio or at the end of this sequence that it's going, that didn't make sense. Don't do that. So, yeah. Oh, no. All right. So, and then once you've, once it's finished, all right. So now you get a log of the, now they do give you some, this is some information that you would send to the audio post folks. So if they give you this information, usually it's going to be also located on the, oh, look, picture final. And sometimes it might be embedded in this. But notice it's a single file. It has all of the audio inside of it, and it's about 380 megs. Okay. So what do we do with this now? Well, your audio mixer is going to come over here, and they're going to open, or they're going to import. Actually, maybe we'll just do this from. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it this way. Let's see how this crash and burn. Boop, ba-doop, ba-doop, ba-doop. Final. Open it. Ooh, you give me a choice. All right, well then I will choose a new folder. Oh, I can't choose. I need to choose another place entirely. So new folder. Let's do audio mix test. Sure, we'll do that. Create, choose. And now it's basically taking that OMF and just dumping it into that folder that I just created. So this would be, okay, so now what do we see? We see that there's no video. Actually, though, that's the fun part of this, is that the OMF doesn't include a video track usually. So if you wanted to have a separate video track, you would need to do a quick export from here of picture as well. The nice thing is that you can just make it small, so you can export everything, but you would not export audio, just export video, and choose, no, not that one. We wouldn't choose that one. We would choose, I mean, I wouldn't, for audio folks, I'd give them H.264 and just make it like a reasonably small, but I just don't send anybody an NTSC because first of all, that file's gigantic. And second of all, it's garbage interlaced. It's just, oh, please. So that's what we'll do is just an H.264 render really quick, and then you queue it up, and that you would export that, and that would go along with the OMF. Okay, I'm gonna skip this here. The idea that what you're gonna look at inside of Audition is not gonna have a video track associated with it. You do have the ability to do that by adding a video here, but it's not included in the OMF that got shipped to Audition. So what's in this file that we can see? So you'll notice that the clip automation seems to be there. Let me see if I can bring up the Hello. All right. So, and this is the part of the interface that gets a little weird, is that in comparison to how Premiere works, if you start messing with scroll wheels and other things while your mouse is in certain areas, you'll see that it behaves differently. If you do it over here and you scroll, you're going to basically zoom your tracks. If you zoom here, if you scroll up and down, you notice that it increases the height of the tracks here as well. Cool. All right. So let's see what we've got. We've got our dialogue is still here. Our the music bed. Notice the music bed is no longer in a single track. It's actually got it split into a left and right channel, and they're not. They're actually both being sent out, but the stereo pan is not done. So this is now collapsed to a mono, and you would need to re-separate those. So you need to go over here and do left all the way to the left, right all the way to the right, stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight. And let me see if I can pull up the track automation. Let's see. Well, this shows you all the times I spend working inside of here. It's like, can you tell the person that works more in Pro Tools than in Audition, like how much they struggle with this? So, all right. So the other part of this that I want to make sure of is once you've imported your project in here, the first thing that you should probably do is start to set up your bass lines, right? Like I put in that in this here. So you're going to use your mixer and submixes to set up those bass lines. So let's go back into Audition. You will come in here. You're going to want to add some. These are your submix tracks. They call them bus tracks, but that's what they call submixes here. So we'd add a stereo bus, and you'll see that there's one bus A, and you can call this DX, and now you know that that's your dialogue. And then you can come up here. You can assign this to DX. Same with this one. So your output's going to go to DX, and now you do have options. You can also route them directly to different audio outputs. That's kind of cute. Ditto again. We'll add another track for the. The best part about this is when you start to move these tracks around. Come on, there we go. Okay, and we have an MX track. So see what I mean in terms of you have more, you can't move tracks around inside of Premiere very easily, but here it's just a question of grabbing this little control and just kind of dragging up and down. So if you need to reorder anything or group tracks together, you have a lot more capability here. The other part of this that you'll start to notice is that all of these have different colors. So now our, let me bring up the routing for this, and we'll go MX, MX, and now all of our, the basic routing that we had set up before in Premiere is the same now here in Audition. So what's the next thing? The next thing is, okay, so fades. Again, fades should have been brought in. So you'll notice that if you zoom way in, the fades that I've added in Premiere should already be there. If they aren't, then you would add them. So you would go in and click on them. You might want to nuance these because the fades that you get in Premiere have only a certain number of options in terms of the creativity or the aggressiveness or the softness of the fade. You can come in here and adjust that entirely to suit the track. You can also trim them because you'll notice that they're, each of these has a fair bit of silence before and after. Maybe you want to trim these shorter, you can. Now that you're in Audition, you're totally working from the same points of view. You have very similar tools to what you had before in terms of these would be trimming. You can also trim using the keyboard again, I don't have that. Notice when you move your fade, when you move the in and out of the clip, your fade is actually, in Premiere, what would happen is your fade would kind of roll with it. And here, this is actually moving the end of the clip without moving that marker for where the fade ends. What else? Oh, the other things to note from this. I'm sorry, man. This is where the mouse starts to really be a hindrance to me. Is the ability to not enable input. So you can come over and you can change the track color of any of these tracks. You can actually, I believe you can change it to whatever hue you want, but you have several options, so you don't have to adopt. So if you know that all your, you want all of your shotgun tracks to be of a certain color, you can mark that it doesn't change the color of the tracks themselves or the clips themselves. That's a different matter. And what else? What other differences are we looking for? So when you get in here, you're going to start looking at dealing with the same aspects of. So this is kind of the sequence view of your audio. All right. So this is the sequence view of all of the audio for that project, and then you have this tab up here called Mixer, and then you click on that, and you get this channel strip view again, which again looks very similar to kind of the output that we had seen in the audio track mixer in Premiere. Once you start to mess with that, then you can hit your playback, and you'll notice now that your audio tracks are actually, the other thing to notice is that your audio track 2, because it was muted, didn't actually get imported here. So if you mute an audio track and you export the OMF, you're not sending that in the file. Today I learned. All right. So, but again, since we've routed everything correctly, you'll see that the mix, you've got your DX bus, which is where your dialogue is basically coming through. You have an MX bus, which is where your music is coming through. But all of those track levels did not come in from Premiere. So as a reminder, when you came into Premiere, all of this automation that you did not come through. Okay, this has all been basically was left behind in Premiere. You're not going to see it again. So when you come in here, you're going to have to reset those baselines. So you know that your music, you don't want to be above a 7. So you'll mix it down to a -7. You'll want your DX probably at a -3 or 4 or something, just so for safety, so that if for some reason it peaks, somebody laughs really loud, you're not overdriving your output. Then you also have the ability for these individual channels to add effects, and these are very similar to what you've seen in Premiere, but there's more of them. So in this case, you have all of these. You have an additional. I think it's the click remover or something like that is the one that's added here that isn't available in Premiere. You have more reverb options. You have definitely some different effects for distortion or mastering or other stuff like that. You have pitch shifting and other stuff. And then if you have these audio plugins you'll see these for Pro Tools as well, for Cubase and other things. That's what the VST is all about. AU is audio units, which is from Apple. You won't see those in Windows, but so all of these are additional capabilities that you can bolt on to Audition for custom plugins for sound that might not have a version of that plugin available for Premiere, but it's available for, it's something that will work in Audition, and so there you go. You have more options here for dealing with adding stuff. You have a send bus. Again, I'm not going to go into that. You have an EQ, an individual EQ for each of your tracks. So, and you can basically go in by clicking on the little pencil right here. You can go in and change the EQ for each individual track. Usually in Premiere, you have to go in and add an EQ effect. But here it's kind of out of the box available to you. And it's a pretty healthy one. It's, what is that, a 7-channel? It's got seven different channel of frequency that you can tweak. And 2 of them are, it's got a low shelf and a high shelf, so, or a high cut and a low cut. So you can enable these to be, so notice how you can kind of, you know, you can go nuts with this, and you're affecting the frequencies of a lot of stuff. Whereas if you do what they call a notch, you'll see that the cut happens much closer to that cutoff frequency. So this is what they call a shelf. And so you'll see that those have a slope of a really steep slope or a real smooth slope. So a smooth one will look like that. But yeah, each of these, how many of you guys have ever used EQ in your work so far? A couple of you? All right. Anybody understand, anybody who does not understand what equalization or EQ is? All right. So equalization is where you can affect the audio of usually it could be an audio clip, it could be an audio track, but what you're doing is you want to enhance some frequencies and you want to suppress others. Now in audio post language, you're boosting or you're cutting. So you're going to say, I want to boost the highs. Then the audio engineer will say, oh, you want to raise the gain on the upper end of the frequency. So what you'll notice here is that you have audio frequencies. Okay, so, and this is done at what they call a logarithmic scale. Don't freak out. It's just that you'll notice that as numbers get closer to these landmark numbers, so 100, 1 kilohertz, and so on, 10 kilohertz, and then, well, they don't really go beyond 24 because you can't hear. No, nobody can hear above that. It's ultrasonic. So the idea of when you hit these, so you'll see that as lower frequencies start to approach these milestones, they get closer and closer together. That's called logarithmic scale. So the idea here is that for low frequencies, you know, that's your bass tones, that's your, you know, the boom. And then you have about 1 kilohertz is what they would call the mid tones. Okay, so these are your mids. And then above that, from usually 4 kilohertz and up to as high as you can possibly hear, is the highs. Okay, so when you talk about like treble and bass on your stereo, treble is up here, bass is down here, and your mids don't have a control sometimes. Well, in this one you do. And it can be very specific if you want. You can make it very specific in terms of the ability to, you know, emphasize certain frequencies. So if you know that somebody's speaking, maybe you want to emphasize the brightness of you want to make their dialogue a little bit brighter, you can do that. So let me see if I can make this make sense in a way that's not going to deafen us. So let's go back here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to solo this track, okay? So
We also host a lot of regular events.
okay, so that's my friend Dana saying we also host a lot of regular events. It's like, great, that's awesome, Dana. Tell me more. The thing that's missing from this is the transport controls are missing from this, and it's making me kind of crazy. So I'm going to bring them up. Transport, okay, so that I can kind of see what I'm seeing. So I'm going to bring them over here, and now I've got level meters, I've got my transport controls, and now a selection. So I'm soloing this one, and I want to look at this.
First nonprofit arts and community makerspace.
Okay, so that's great. Community makerspace. We'll start it again, and I'll start by by taking this, and I'm going to just pull it up, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this up, and you'll see that what I'm doing is I've got my frequency is at 3120 hertz, so 3 kilohertz, and I'm lifting it by 8 decibels. And then there's this notion of a Q, which is how sharp that curve is. Higher Qs are sharper. Lower Qs, 0 is very flat. Usually you wouldn't see something lower than 0.3 or 0.2, maybe, yeah, 0.5. 0.5 is probably as soft as you want to make these. So you can see a very gradual rise and fall for that frequency. So a lot of neighboring frequencies are going to be affected by this. Whereas if you went with something, and I guess the maximum here is, oh no, you can go beyond. You can go as far as you can, as far as you can imagine. You can get very specific on the frequency that you're messing with. All right, so for now, we'll go back to the default and we'll play it.
Chimera is Sonoma County's first nonprofit arts and community makerspace. We're a community of artists, makers, designers, and engineers who love sharing things with each other and building projects together. Chimera was started out of a desire to build a creative community in Sonoma County and link together
Trying to say, well,
all the amazing talent that
why am I not? I'm not affecting this. What's the matter?
Here in one space.
Oh, I didn't enable it. So it was not turned on. Now that it is, you'll see.
Members of Chimera get access to awesome tools like 3D printers, laser cutters, a jewelry studio.
So you can hear it's a little bit brighter when I turn up the high, when I lift the highs. This will actually make it boomier.
Electronics lab, and a lot more. Chimera opened its doors in December 2000.
So now you can see his voice quality is a lot fatter. It's a lot richer. So you can do a lot with just messing with, and I exaggerate these. Normally, guys, you're not going to be doing moves like this with your EQ. This is like insanity. Somebody, an audio guy would look at you like, "What are you doing, man?" So just be aware. I'm doing this because we're in a classroom and these speakers aren't very awesome. I've done this in other classrooms where I have high quality monitor speakers for the class to hear, and you can be a little more nuanced. This way I have to kind of really be, ham-handed, as they would say. So you got to get an idea of what the EQ can do. You just have to remember to enable it by pressing the green button. So if it's like this, it's disabled. If it's turned on, these will light up blue, and these will, and obviously you'll hear the sound has changed. Okay. Automation works very similarly. You'll notice that you do have the same sorts of abilities that you had here in Premiere for writing keyframes. Use it as you wish. I think that part of that is the ability to, you do have to, again, if you had any automation in there from the audio track mixer, you're going to have to redo it. Okay. When you get down to the end of your process, you've worked through your audio, you need to export it. Here's the idea, is that you want to basically, you do have this, okay? You do. If you export it, it's going to basically ask you to open up it's going to basically dump an XML file for you, and you're going to have to go in and open that, and that's going to try and open it in Premiere. You can do this. Again, if you're not exporting it back to that editor, you're going to be in deep kimchi, so you probably still need to come over here and do a multi-track mixdown where it will come in and it will, you're going to want to give it a destination. You're going to want to tell what format you want. Remember again that, there's more choices here than you had in Premiere. But the two that are easy, that are very, very common to go between are AIF and WAV. You can do FLAC. Why you would, I'm not sure. You could do OGG. Why you would, I'm not sure. Because most of the folks that you're going to be dealing with are going to be dealing with these two formats here. So for now, for this one, we'll do that. We'll do the sample size. We're going to leave it, but you can change it if you know that you were working in a higher sample rate in the project. You can master it at a specific sample rate. Same as the bit depth, you can choose that you're going to dump it out as 16 bits. So format, and then the mixdown option. So here's where the rubber kind of meets the road. So you want to, these are what you're going to actually output. This is what we're talking about, stubs, and you can choose to output in, you know, portions of the mix. You can output a stereo mix. Sometimes you'll get requests from clients that want a 5.1 mix and a stereo mix. Sometimes they'll want a stereo mix without dialogue. How are you going to do that? So, you know, you might have a submix put together, or a bus that is a stereo bus that you don't route, you route everything to except dialogue, and then you just save that off, and now they can go have their foreign actors do the dub for your film. And all of the Foley, all of the sound effects, all the music is still there, but all the dialogue's missing. You can do that. It's harder to do that in Premiere. You can do it in Premiere, but it's a lot harder, and it's not as easy to generate those output files. Because in Premiere, the sequence wants to just be a thing all by itself. It's not like, oh, I just want you to save the audio. I mean, yes, you can, but I just want to save the audio from the sequence. Yes, you can do it. It's not as easy as this. So you can choose to output individual tracks. So you could do individual tracks, but those are not the clips. Those are each individual audio track from time index 0 all the way to end of picture would be that single wave file. So remember that. So when you go back into Premiere, you're not going to see the same thing you saw before. Okay. So when you do that, you're going to click OK, and I'm not going to open the files. You can include markers and other metadata, and that's fine, because that's going to end up going back over to Premiere. Now, when you get back to Premiere, you want to go open these fine files in your project. You're going to come over here, and you're not going to look at that way. You're going to look at it this way. So here you go. Here's your mixdowns. You've got a stereo mixdown, a DX mixdown, and an MX mixdown. So you can actually import all of those. Notice that they have these sidecar files. Again, these are media cache files. So if you just leave them where they are, Premiere will know what to do with them. If you delete them, well, all right, whatever. So click import. No, really, click import. So now what you've got is you've got these audio tracks. What are you going to do with them? So you can come back to your sequence, or if maybe you might not want to do the exact same sequence, you could copy the sequence. So maybe we right click on this and click duplicate, and then we go sequence 2 or picture final with audio, and then double click that, close down the, oh, no, sorry, double click that, bring it in. Now you want to basically, you want to bring in your new tracks, but you don't want to keep these because, damn, these are dead to you now. You've already done all that you can do with these. So we'll minimize them, and we will bring in 3 new tracks. 0, 3, and just have them be, yeah, after audio 3. And now you can grab your new shiny audio files, bring them in. Oh, no, that's right. It wants to. I'm flailing here, guys. Don't mind me. I'm tired too. So let's move the DX in here. So this will be your new DX channel. You can move MX here, and then for giggles, we'll just put the mix. We'll put the stereo mix down next to it. We'll mute that, and now.
Premiere is Sonoma County's first nonprofit arts and community makers.
All right, so I botched it because I didn't mute the. So what you're actually getting was you're getting both mics from him. That's why it doesn't sound as sweet as in the audio file. But anyway, it's the point of this is that the audio that you're actually listening to was the mixdown audio from Audition. So let me zoom this so that you can see. You're not listening to these files anymore. You're not listening to any of these. You're listening to these two files. So if you solo it.
We're a community of artists, makers, designers.
Okay, so I mean, these are literally, you're listening to these two files right here, not any of the stuff that you sent to Audition. You should be able to come in here, right click, or command click, and disable. So you can disable all of these clips, and now they won't play no matter what you do. You can leave these open, and they still won't play, but you'll see that all of the audio that you have is right here, just on those two tracks. Okay, ran way past what I meant to do on this one, but whatever. It's all good. Any questions to this? So this is literally that round trip. It's like we went out, we did all the changes, and we brought it back. You can do the whole, send to Adobe Premiere sequence. You can do that. Whatever. And most of the tutorials you're going to find out there will be like, it's super convenient. Yes, it is super convenient so long as you're working on the project by yourself. The minute that you start working with another person or another team, or you're sending it out to somebody, they're going to want one of these standard file formats like OMFs, and they're going to ask you what you want back, and you can be like, oh, you can send me stubs, and they're going to know exactly what you're saying because you're speaking their language. Okay, finally, let's talk a little bit about some research pieces. Ooh, this is too bright. Now I got to turn on the lights because now it's too darn bright. Okay, everyone asleep? Sweet. All right, so I used to have a longer spiel about sound design and spotting for sound effects. Generally speaking, when you're looking in a project and you have an area in your picture where you need sound effects to happen, and maybe it happens in Premiere, maybe it happens in Audition with a video file next to it, is the ability to set down markers for what what's happening at that particular moment in your sequence, or in this case on the Audition timeline. So what was I just doing? I tapped the M key at that time index. So while it's playing, and I'm going to mute this now because I don't want to have it talking over me, but as it's playing, you might see something in video and be like, oh yeah, that's where such and such happens. And you just tap M on the keyboard and you notice that it's showing markers and said, this is where the camera pans and I want to have a swoosh. Okay, I'll put a marker for that. So you can actually come in here and deal with providing those markers with at those particular time indexes, so that at this point I want something to happen, and these markers basically put that into your timeline so that you can kind of plan what's going on in your mix. You can plan for things like inserting sound effects or audio cues of some variety. Maybe you just know I need to put a marker there because I'm going to come back and deal with something, or there's an audio issue there, there's a noise reduction problem, there's some background noise, there's a hum, there's whatever. I mean, it's like this notion of using markers is hugely helpful in your workflow of just finding out what you're trying to accomplish for the project. Okay, sound effects. Surprisingly, so the best sound effects in the world are the ones that you record yourselves. Yeah? See, Evan's agreeing. I'm going to look, every time I ask a question, I'm going to look at Evan. Evan, how am I doing? All right, so the best sound effects in the world are ones that you create for yourself. You know why? Come on, don't yawn, tell me. Because they're only free if you don't pay yourself, but they're first of all, you get exactly what you want, and you don't have to pay somebody else to get it. All right, so it's not free, but it's much cheaper for the good ones. All right, so surprisingly, there are a lot of good sources, and this year I just added one. So as it stands, Adobe actually makes a huge amount of sound effects available to you for free. And that includes some Foley and a lot of ambiances and other stuff like that. Here's a link for it. And I just hit the damn scroll, but I'm going to turn the scroll knob off of this thing. So I'm not going to click on it because we're racing through at this point. But there is this presentation I'll put up on the canvas so that you see it. Second one is YouTube, believe it or not, has a free sound effects library for you to use. You don't have to use them on YouTube videos. How's that for weird? Okay. They also have free music that you can use, but usually that's using the same libraries that are freely available online. So my feeling is that Google's done their search engine magic and has found all of these either Creative Commons or freely licensed audio clips and sound effects, and they've just compiled them into their own index. But hey, they've done the hard work. They found it for you. And they're usually pretty decent quality. Then there's ones that are not free but not too expensive. Is a great resource that I've used in the past. It's called SoundDogs. SoundDogs.com. They have a ton of different stuff. If you're looking for a specific thing, I mean, it could be like, hey, I want a 2009 Honda Accord starting up and driving away. You might just find it there. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's crazy. Then there's always the really expensive ones that, if money's no object, you're welcome to go there. Pond 5 is very expensive. And Getty Images. And, I mean, Getty's like the Saks Fifth Avenue of stock. I mean, you want to spend top dollar, go to Getty. So, yeah, and then, of course, the last bullet there is the world of the internet awaits. So make it fun. So it bears repeating, the best sound effects you're ever going to find are the ones that you create. So you will need a good high quality recorder. You're going to want something with a high sample rate, okay? Why do you want a high sample rate for sound effects? Anybody got an idea? At 9:15? What's
You always go down and go back up. You want as much information as possible when you're trying to record a high quality sound so you can extrapolate as much depth to it as you can.
Okay, so what you said for the class is, and for the recording, what the heck, is that when you oversample, which is what this basically boils down to, you can slow things down and still retain all of the data, all that information for that sound at a slower speed. So if you have something that you're playing really fast and you want to slow it down, which is a sound effect technique, by the way, and lots of sound engineers will play this. I mean, the experimentation here can go off the chart, and I don't have time for it, but higher sample rates are really critical for this. If you record something at 48 kilohertz and you slow it down by half, it's going to sound it's not going to sound as good because you've lost, you don't have that information of what's in between those, because you're slowing down the waves, and so it's going to start jagging it out as opposed to being more smooth. Large sample size. This is the time where having 24 bits when you're recording can be very, very helpful for you, because when you're dealing with sound effects, sometimes you really need that additional dynamic range, or you want the ability to work with very quiet stuff and still be able to increase the volume and not lose quality that way. And you need lots and lots of patience. And really good headphones helps as well in this respect. When you're dealing with sound effects and listening, you want very good isolation. You want something that covers your ears, and it's not earbuds. Earbuds are not good for sound effect recording. They really aren't. And so there's a lot of Epic Sound is a site that I've used in the past for some of this research. Enjoy spending time, your copious free time, like I got, and record. And definitely, if you have the opportunity and you have the equipment, you should. If you don't have the time or opportunity, well, you're going to spend more money than you got. I mean, it's either you got time or you got money. If you don't have money, spend the time. Creating sound effects from noise. The short answer, so you can actually create some sound effects entirely from scratch inside of Audition even. We're out of time, otherwise I would do a demo of that, but you guys look like you've had enough of me. But the steps are pretty straightforward and they work every time. You'll take a type of noise, or you take a basic sound and you can run it through some filters. You slow it down. The other part of the sound experimenters for sound designers is play things backwards. Play things backwards and slow down. Play things backwards, slow down, and run a pitch shift on it. You know, there's all kinds of things you can do inside of the tools that you have available to you to make any sound in the world. You just need to experiment to find those combinations. You're going to find this experimenting is central to a lot of where you're at in this part of the curriculum, because you know there's so many ways to skin a cat. It's ridiculous now. It's fanned out to a point where I can show you a couple and then I go, and then there's more, you know, and you guys have to kind of figure it out. So you can step one, take any type of noise, mess with it. Step 2, experiment further. And then step 3, repeat until you're either satisfied or you're out of time and ship it, because that's what sound guys do. Finally, audio effects added to sound effects. You know, you think when you're adding effects to effects, what does that mean? So sound effects in this respect are a media clip that actually sounds like something you want. Whereas audio effects are just like these kind of features that you can drop into, like reverb or distortion or overdrive or vocal enhancement or compression. There's all of these different things available to you that you can apply to this sound to shape it the way you want. It's, you know, these audio effects they're available to you in both, but realistically, if you're doing sound effect design and that sound design, you're not working in Premiere. You're way outside of Premiere's wheelhouse on this one. You want to be working in, at least in Adobe Audition. This is another one of those cases where free tools like Audacity can sometimes fit in as well. You can do sound effect work in Audacity, sure. Yeah, so it's like distortion, overdrive, flange, chorus, reverb, and on and on and on. You can apply these things in any number of combinations over and over again until the sound has no relationship to its original sound. And it becomes laser beams, or it becomes fireballs, or it becomes whatever. Yeah, question. Do you have a question?
No.
Oh, you just, okay, cool, right on. I flail too. All right, so that is the end for tonight.